You're listening to A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast, brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. And my name is Jeff Milo, and joining me today is Michelle Williamson. Hello.
Hi, Jeff.
We're here to talk about school librarianship, and we're actually talking to a school librarian. Tell us about today's episode.
Yeah, so today we're talking with Julie Saunders, who is the staff person in the school libraries at Ferndale Lower and Upper Elementaries.
And as we learn in the episode, she is very much jack of all trades, everything. She's carting books, she's checking out books, she's shelving books, she's recommending books, story times, technology, information literacy, 2 buildings, so many kids.
Yeah, and this is something I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, right? Because they come into our library, they see how a public library works, they see all the staff members, but if you don't have kids, and even if you do, you're really not seeing what's going on in a school library. So I think this is a fun conversation to kind of demystify that for folks who haven't really probably thought about school libraries for a long time.
Also, Julie from Ferndale Schools is mentioning that the kind of the support for having a school librarian is coming back. I feel like we were in some dystopic times there in the early 2010s when I just felt like I read a lot of news stories where schools just did not have a media specialist, what have you, a librarian, or anyone in their media center at all.
Yeah, it's been
some dark times.
Yeah, it's been enlightening because it's definitely a thing I've been vocal about. Is that her position is not technically a librarian position. I do feel like there's some movement there, which we are kind of bucking the trend in that way because a lot of school districts, it's when you want to save some money, that's kind of the first place you can go because typically it's a standalone position. I've heard a lot of school librarians say they feel like an island because there's no one equivalent to them in the school. So sometimes it's easy for schools, I think, to say, I don't see the value there. Let me cut that position, save some money. But especially with the information literacy stuff we've talked about, I think personally and professionally that it's a crucial position. Yeah. And I really hope that more schools can kind of reverse this and see the benefits and the value of having a qualified certified school librarian in that space.
Right. And it's tricky because there isn't any standardized test we could apply to a student to demonstrate the value that the library had on their school experience.
I mean,
it is there.
There are studies out there. Okay, so I have, trust me, some emails. I have included some studies. So yeah, there is research out there that definitely supports it. They've looked at standardized test scores, and they are higher in districts with school librarians.
We're here to pick the brain of someone who can tell us all about the modern school librarian, and that's Julie Saunders from Ferndale Schools. Here's our chat.
Yeah, coming from public libraries into school libraries, it definitely was like a shock to the system. Do you want me to go into my background a little bit?
In fact, that is our first question.
Okay. So I did get my teaching degree and but then couldn't find a teaching job. It was right after 9/11 had happened and nobody was retiring, and so I ended up getting my master's then in library science. And I was like, well, maybe someday I'll go back into the school. So I had the school media concentration, part of it as well. And so when my son, and then I continued to work in public libraries for about 11 or 12 years. When my son started school, I went into the library and had a similar experience as Michelle and was just like, what is happening here? Like, there is nothing being done in this place. So I'm like, I'll just volunteer a little, just like here and there. And I was just working part-time then at the public library. And so the principal at that time was like, hey, would you consider coming to work here part-time? And so that's kind of how I got in there and then ended up leaving the public library and becoming a full-time school librarian. And then just came to Ferndale this is my first year at Ferndale. And it was, I came from a very small charter school two buildings with over 1,000 students between the two. And like Michelle said, Lower has very little to no support at all there. The books are extremely old and the library's just, there hasn't been anyone, I don't think really, because actually my position is not as a media specialist. I'm actually a paraprofessional. So I'm not even recognized as a media specialist in the district. So that's, that's a little frustrating. So there isn't, I don't think, as much energy maybe placed into the libraries in the district. So that's kind of where when I met Michelle, we were like, hey, this isn't right. Like, we need to change this whole thing. And so it's been exciting. I think that they're on their way to maybe seeing school librarians as more than just someone that checks out books. I don't know. That's my hope.
I mean, and I think about I've been a fly on the wall in the school library for a few years now, and I think about just how much what I've seen change over the years of it being, when I first started and the person who worked in there, it was sort of a more old school, like what we would remember from childhood, reading stories on the mat. But over the years, with your predecessors and with you, definitely I've seen really dynamic teaching in the library, certainly still an emphasis on books and literacy, but so much cool technology being introduced and information literacy. I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but it is really cool to see, just in the short time I've been in there, how dynamic the space has become.
Yeah, but it does bring into question, what are folks' expectations? What do they expect a school library to look like? In my school library in the 90s, the individual who was overseeing the library was not a librarian. And I was only, 8, 9, 10, so I didn't actually get her backstory, but at least heard from my own mother that she was not a librarian. I'm not sure what her expertise was, but she was kind of almost a glorified monitor. Our class would be ushered in for about a half hour to basically read, explore the shelves, what have you. And I don't know where our teacher went, probably to have a break. And that individual who was in charge of the library, this is the 90s, there was no computers there. So it wasn't a media center either. And that's just how it felt like it was treated. More so a monitor, I guess. I could walk up to this individual and say, I like scary books, and she could take me to a shelf and show me more books. It wasn't exacting reader's advisory, but I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, it is changing in some districts, but I still think that is a large component of what school librarians are doing, right? Is just like pushing reading and making it, still trying to make it more exciting for kids. And like, that's always been my passion still. I mean, there are other things that I'd like to do. So for example, like you said, it's like a 30-minute when you were younger. That's still how it is. Like, that's not enough time for me to do a lot of dynamic teaching in 30 minutes. So, that is something that I would like to change in the future, because a lot of specials like PE or music, their classes are longer. They have like 40 to 50-minute classes, and some of them meet twice a week. So I only see kids 30 minutes once a week. And a lot of that is just to like make sure that they are hopefully checking out new and interesting books. And then I do sneak technology in there as much as I can, as well as, talking about parts of literacy as well that hopefully sticks with them.
But I remember when I was in there yesterday and you were having them do research, and by the end of the class, some kids, because they have to get their Chromebook, they have to log in. And so, when you're talking about 3rd and 4th graders, a half an hour with the entering and the exiting, that's really not enough time to be doing research, which is the perfect place for them to be learning it in the library.
It's still encouraging that there's engagement, though, because the way it looked in the 90s is we were ushered in, and this individual in the position of being a librarian did not interact with us. It was more so that she just sat at the desk and made sure we didn't throw books at each other. We just walked around and kind of free-ranged around the shelves. It was like a study hour almost, if we could perceive it that way. But it was also only half an hour, and it felt too short.
Well, that's because you're probably someone that liked to read books.
Exactly. This wasn't something I was curious about, though. Let's go back real quick to when the principal asked you whether or not you were interested in this. Can you remember the reason why you said yes? Could you put that into words? The reason you were really motivated to, because you could have said no, but tell us why you said yes.
So at that time, I had been in a public library for 11 years, and I was the teen librarian at that time. I was like, it's teen librarians. That's a burnout job. It really is, because you are doing a lot of programming. A lot of it's evening programming. A lot of it is like food stuff. So you're constantly crafting. And so I was really looking for something new, I think. And I mean, to be honest, the idea of having the same breaks as my child, and being on that same schedule was also something that would be nice. And working with kids, again, like smaller children, that was always where I was, most interested, since I had an early childhood background. So all of those things combined, I think it was kind of the perfect time for me to try something new. Not that it wasn't any less work. It's just different. It was different work is what I've learned.
Yeah, I think I don't know if people realize that about working in public libraries. It's a lot of evenings and weekends and stuff like that. And to get like a school schedule library job is pretty great as a parent.
Yes.
So Julie, what does a typical day look like for you in the school library?
So it's different at each building. But I would say at Lower, since I'm on a cart this year, music is in the library. I am in, 23 different rooms in 2.5 days.
Wow.
And
pushing a cart.
Wow.
Yeah, pushing a cart. And every other week I'm doing book checkout with them in baskets on my cart. So it's been a challenge for sure. And along with that, the good thing about that is I'm not shelving books over at Lower, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So at Upper, though, I have this beautiful space, and, every day it's making sure Chromebooks are plugged in, ready for that day, and getting books put out on the shelf if I have time from the previous day, getting all the tables. I have 7 different tables, so getting all the materials ready for the day. Usually at Upper, I see 10 classes most days, and then here at Lower, I see 7 or 8. So it's just a constant flow of kids coming in and out. And a lot of times I do start with a story connection, and then we'll have some kind of activity that connects with the story. Like this week is Abilities Awareness Week. So we're talking about Temple Grandin. And then the research portion, they're researching farm animals. And then actually, Michelle, I decided that today I would learn how to use our thermobind so that in my spare 30 minutes, I could bind some books. So, like Michelle said, it's a lot. There is no processors, there's no shelvers. I'm doing everything. And then you'll have, like you try and help teachers. Someone came in while I was just doing this podcast that wanted help with like a recommendation. So then you're recommending books also to teachers as well.
Wow.
It's a lot in one day.
Mm-hmm.
And the monthly school library journal comes out. I got to go through there, and I got to look through, and find what books I'd like to be able to purchase for the school collections as well. And that's 2 different buildings that I'm purchasing for. So I try and fit that in too.
For listeners at home, there's usually 3 main departments in any public library. Julie's doing all 3 of them at once.
We actually had her order some stuff. I'm the book fair chair at the school, so we have these reward Scholastic dollars, and they had a sale yesterday. And I said, I think I want to take advantage of this sale. I was amazed how quickly you were able to fill up the cart.
I'm good at spending money.
Yeah. She's like, okay, I'm done. I got it.
Yeah.
You're efficient, though. You have to be.
Yeah.
Julia, Julie, you were in public libraries before, so you're aware of all the misconceptions people might have about public libraries and public library workers, that they get to sit around and read all day, or they are constantly shushing people, or they're chasing you down with fines in a very threatening manner. Are there misconceptions people might have over what a school librarian does?
I mean, I think a lot of the same ones apply, right? Like while the library is meant, I think the school library even more is meant to be like a place of learning, and yet it should be a reasonable volume. I do still think that some people think it has to be completely silent. And for me, as long as they're on task, I don't mind if they're talking. But if that is like I think something that's perceived as like it has to be silent. And also that I get to read. Like, I can't tell you the last time I read a children's book for fun, for pleasure.
Right.
Except for the ones that I read to students. Like, I'm lucky I have that opportunity to do that. And also just that I check out books, right? And actually, I've been talking to Michelle about getting self-checks so that I'm not spending 10 minutes or whatever it is, 5 to 10 minutes of that class time, that work time, checking books out to kids so that they can take some more ownership of doing things themselves and having self-check put into the school libraries. And then I can walk around and actually do more recommending and helping them with what they're working on. It's hard to do both.
I got to toot your horn too, Julie. This is the first year that I've seen anyone do electronic checkout. Up until this year, we were still checking out with cards. So kudos to you for actually implementing barcode scanning checkout in the 2022.
Well, it's so funny because they've had the system in place for several years. And still, we're having the kids write their names on library cards. I was like, I will not be doing that.
Wow.
I was so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So
they don't understand it. They're like, how does it know what I have? I'm like, the magic of technology. It's very exciting. So yeah, that has helped a lot.
How do you think that school librarianship is different today? I kind of talked about it a little bit, like how it's changed over the last few years that I've been there. But say people who haven't been, to an elementary school library since the 90s, like Jeff.
Like me.
Like, can you explain to them what would be different if they were in there today?
I mean, one thing we haven't really talked about is the introduction of STEM into school libraries. So I think, and, I just bought a bunch of STEM materials with the last Scholastic Book Fair money, but that's been a huge innovation that's come into libraries, public and school. But we do a lot of experimenting with different materials and just letting them create. So it's not necessarily just about reading, right? There's all about innovation with materials, and like this, the sticker thing that we did. I usually try and give them a lot of choices when it's their free time. And some students will still choose just to go to like our comfy reading chairs and silent read. But a lot of them will do free choice media sites, or they will use the STEM materials. So I really feel like the library has just elevated from reading to trying to find other ways to give students options, right? Like what else they can explore and do in the library.
Could you,
that's been my goal.
When you say STEM materials, could you just explain like maybe your favorite of those, like what those are? Yeah,
like a lot of students have really been into building. So we have a lot of different building materials, whether they're like little plastic puzzle pieces that fit together in certain ways, or just different cube blocks. We do a lot of building. And then at Lower, I have incorporated, like there's like these maze runs, like marble maze runs that those students, younger students, are really into. So again, with engineering and building. And sometimes, a lot of times, I try and incorporate a story along with it, like Ada Twist, Scientist, or Iggy Peck, Architect. That series is amazing for STEM. So we can talk about building, and then they can go and create something from the materials. So not just reading a story, but finding more fun, creative ways to talk about books.
I go back to almost the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. Now we're talking science, technology, engineering, math. And it's so cool that the librarian is doing that. And that's probably one of the biggest differences between public library and school library, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think that public libraries, I believe, kind of were doing it before school libraries. I mean, because public libraries, especially I would say in youth, have become very good at finding programming and bringing families in for so many different creative, ideas that hopefully I feel like school librarians are trying to do that same thing now that public libraries have kind of always done. But I think that public libraries have more funding. And so that really is great for public libraries. But I think that it needs to be a partnership too. And we've talked about this as well, that it would be great to have more collaboration between the school libraries and public libraries and not have a feeling of competition, which is kind of, I've seen that in some areas and it's sad. Like, we're both trying to help families and our students. So I think that there should be a partnership there.
Yeah, so I kind of touched on information literacy before. Thinking about technology in the library, what are some ways with the computer that you're talking about literacy, technology, information technology? Like, what at this age in your teaching, so at upper it's 3rd to 5th grade, with one 1st to 3rd grade class, and then at lower, it's K to 2. So how do you start to introduce the concept of information literacy, computer research, all that stuff at this age?
So unfortunately at lower, they are not one-to-one yet. They were supposed to all have devices, and we haven't gotten them yet. So I haven't really done a lot with anything with lower this year. I think they do now have some devices there, but so I will start to look at some of the databases and talk about being safe online and using reliable sources with them, probably, once we get devices. We've talked a little bit about it in general, but nothing specific. And then, the same thing with upper, just a little bit delve deeper into, like today we were doing the research project and someone asked if they could use Wikipedia. And so we talked a little bit about reliable sources and databases that are trustworthy, and that yes, you can use Wikipedia for some things, but this is what you need to keep in mind, that anyone can really publish on those sites. So, and then we talked, the district has like a landing place called Clever, like a platform. And so you can drop links in there. So I have a media page, and they know that that's a safe place where they can go. And the district also has a page with research databases. So I think as they get older, we talk more about their ownership in being responsible online and things they need to look for, especially, when it comes to social media. That's especially our 4th and 5th graders. I think they really start to get more into that as they get older. So talking about their ownership in it, and commonsense.org, I think it's commonsense.org. They have a lot of amazing lessons and information for parents too about using the internet safely. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think a lot of it younger is researching, and then as they get older, we kind of talk about using the internet socially a little bit more.
YouTube.
Right.
They're all on YouTube.
Common sense.
A lot of 5th graders are on TikTok now too, and that's terrifying.
That is terrifying. Yeah, the phrase that Michelle and I like is healthy skepticism, and there's something that feels strange and mildly dystopic about having to tell our children to be skeptical, but it's for their own good. But maybe use your common sense. I like that phrase. I mean, commonsense.org. That's the best phrase. Use your common sense on the internet. So we've talked about tech, we've talked about STEM, we've talked about information literacy. What about like the traditional story times that we remember? Is that still a thing?
Yes, for me it is. I mean, I love to read stories, and I don't think that kids are read books as much as they used to be. I think a lot of parents are putting them on devices more. And I mean, I'm guilty of doing that with my own son. But I think that especially older children enjoy good picture book just as much as the 3 or 4-year-old does. I mean, even as adults, it's nice to appreciate some awesome picture books. So yeah, I do probably half and half. Traditional stories, story time. I have an amazing new rug that I just got in the library and students love it. They love sitting on the carpet and listening to a story. So I hope that never dies in the library, because, you know, at the heart of what we do, it is books and reading. So I want to keep that always.
So what are some of the hot titles in your library? What are some of the standalone or series? Like, what are the kids loving to read these days?
I mean, I think graphic novels, anything graphic novel.
Dogman.
It does not matter, honestly. Some of them will pick older titles, but it's a graphic novel, so they'll read it. Dogman is still really popular. So is Wimpy Kid, Big Nate. We did get some, I have seen resurgence, maybe we'll call it, in nonfiction, especially what's the History Smashers. That's a really great series. And I know I Survive now has come out with graphic novels. So kids are even more excited about that. But nonfiction, I've seen become more popular. I think publishers are making the covers more attractive, and everyone knows that that's what a kid goes for first, right? Even as adults, we do that. We totally judge a book by its cover, even though we tell people not to do it. We do it. So I think a lot of publishers are realizing that and have really upped their game when it comes to nonfiction covers, and kids are really getting into it. So, and I would say biographies are still really popular too. Not sure about a lot of the fiction. It seems like we're leaning a little bit more towards realistic fiction, and maybe our dystopian fantasy books are maybe not as popular here as they used to be, because we've got Babysitter's Club and like Big Nate, like those realistic books, I think, are kind of making a comeback again, at least here.
It goes in phases, right? You know, that whole Hunger Games situation was huge in the early 2010s. Now we're in the early 2020s. Who knows?
Well, and we've been through some stuff in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, I noticed that when I'm at the middle school library on Fridays, they really seem to want comfort reads, and they still really want the graphic novels.
This is also a good PSA for graphic novels are reading.
Yeah, I still have some teachers that are like, don't pick a graphic novel. And I'm like, yes, pick one. They are reading.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. Reading is reading. And I try and educate about there's actually tends to be higher vocabulary in graphic novels, and your brain is like multitasking, right? Like there's so much that's happening in a graphic novel that you have to put together that I just don't think people realize that it's not a baby book, right? Or a picture book.
That's we're out of questions, Julie. It's been great to pick your brain, though.
Awesome. I really appreciate you reaching out, and, you know, hopefully we can do some more collaborating with Ferndale Public Library in the future.
And happy School Library Month, April.
Yes.
Yeah.
When is isn't it National Library something or other?
It's National Library Week, literally at the day we are talking here until Sunday. But you get the entire month.
Okay. Well, nobody has said anything to me, so it's okay. You all have.
We're
that
saying
just proves our point.
Yeah. And thank you for all you do in the schools. It is noticed and acknowledged and appreciated.
I know. I appreciate you too. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate you talking to me.
And that was our chat with Julie Saunders, Ferndale Public Schools, telling us about school libraries, and me sharing a lot of information about my life in the 90s when I used encyclopedias. And just had no idea how important this role was. And thanks to Michelle Williamson for joining us and bringing this conversation to the table.
Of course, I'm always happy to talk about school libraries.
Yes. This has been another episode of A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast. It's brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. The music that you hear at the beginning and end of each episode is by local musician Sean Duffy. If you would like to support this podcast, visit ferndalefriends.org, or you could follow us, rate us, review us, or tell a friend about us. And if you enjoyed this conversation, you think you know someone who might like it too, share it to social media. We'll be back next week with more. Thanks for listening.